In the world of true crime, there has been a hell of a lot go on. Andrew Tate has faced new legal troubles that could potentially finish him. The world's most hated streamer in Johnny Somali pleads guilty in a South Korean court. Ghost Adventures star Aaron Goodwin's wife tried to have him murdered, and a Netflix director is facing some serious jail time, potentially up to 90 years, for stealing $11 million to buy luxury items from Netflix. So let's get diving into the first one, which is Andrew Tate's new legal troubles. The Tate brothers, Andrew and Tristan Tate, arguably two of the most controversial people on the entire planet, and very, very outspoken. Now, we could go on forever about the misogyny and the sexism and the racism and the homophobia that goes on around these guys, but today we're going to be talking about the legal action that is being taken against them by not only the Romanian government, but now also the FBI over in Florida. They have just been released, of course, from their house arrest in Romania and been allowed to tour the world. And after touching down in Florida, it has been announced that they will be investigated by police departments over in Florida. So we're going to talk about what's gone on here, how we've got to this point, and what's next for the Tate brothers. Should they stay in America or overstay their welcome? So the Tate brothers, Andrew and Tristan, again, have been at the centre of controversy for years now. Arrests, house arrests, accusations, bans, and now after months of legal battles, they've been finally allowed to leave Romania. But just as they thought they were in the clear, Florida announced an investigation against them. It goes from bad to worse for these guys. So let's talk about what's going on. First of all, why did Romania finally allow them to leave? What's going on and what's new in Florida with this case? And most importantly, could this be the start of an even bigger legal battle for the Tate brothers? We're going to break it all down. So first of all, to fully understand this entire situation, we need to go back to December of 2022 when the Romanian authorities arrested Andrew and Tristan Tate on charges of human trafficking, rape, and forming an organised crime group. Of course, these charges against the Tate brothers alone are incredibly damning, but it has nothing on what was to follow. The case resolved around allegations that the brothers lured women under false pretenses of relationships and then forced them into online sex work. These accusations were then backed by testimonies from multiple women, leading to their immediate detention in a Romanian jail. They then spent 3 months behind bars before being moved to a house arrest where they continued to fight their charges. Their lawyer pushed back hard, arguing that no concrete evidence actually existed to these claims and that the women involved had already spoken out in defense of the Tate brothers. And even though they were actually released from detention, their legal battles in Romania were not over. In June of 2023, Romanian prosecutors officially indicted them, meaning that the case was still moving forwards. So you're probably wondering, how did they come to leave Romania? For over a year now, Andrew and Tristan were not allowed to leave Romania. Their passports were confiscated and they were closely monitored by the authorities, but after months of delays, their lawyers managed to convince Romanian courts that they were not a flight risk and should be allowed to travel while their trial continues. And in February of 2025, the courts finally ruled that Andrew and Tristan could actually leave the country of Romania under the condition that they would return for their trial. So their first stop comes as no surprise, it was actually Dubai. The Tates wasted absolutely no time at all celebrating in their freedom, sharing clips of their luxurious lifestyle in Dubai. But while they were focused on their escape from Romania, a new problem was brewing across the Atlantic. Just as the Tate brothers were actually preparing to enter the United States, Florida authorities dropped an absolute bombshell on them. Reports have just emerged that the state of Florida has opened an investigation into Andrew Tate. While official details are still scarce, sources say that this could be related to their past allegations of human trafficking and potential financial crimes. Florida's Attorney General's office has remained tight-lipped, but if the case moves forward, it could completely derail the Tate brothers' return to America. So, you're probably wondering what happens next. The Tate brothers have two major legal battles hanging over their heads. The ongoing trial in Romania being the first, and they might have been able to leave, but they are still required to actually return to Romania for their case, and if convicted they could face years in prison. And then we've also got the Florida investigation. So if Florida presses charges, this could lead to a federal case that might involve extradition from Romania. So the worst case scenario for the Tate brothers in the current climate of what's going on. Romania convicts them, forcing them to serve time before dealing with Florida. And then Florida builds up a strong case, meaning that the US authorities could demand their extradition. Well, the best case scenario here is that the Florida case doesn't actually materialize into anything, and they beat their Romanian case and completely walk free. For now, the Tate brothers remain free, but the question is for how long? After they touched down in Florida and were made aware of the charges, Andrew and Tristan Tate had this to say.
Come get me, arrest me, perp walk me, put me on the news, tell everyone I'm a human trafficker. You think I'm not versed? You think I'm not ready? I'm a Navy SEAL in this shit. Fucking come get me, raid my house, take my stuff. You think I sleep with a full phone full of evidence? You think I don't wipe my phone every night? You think I'm dumb? Come get me, arrest me, let's do this all over again.
So the Tate brothers may have escaped Romania, but they're now facing a whole new legal battle. Could Florida bring them down for good, or will they continue to escape the system and walk free? One thing's for sure, this war is far from over. But what do you think about this? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Will the Tate brothers walk away as free men, or will they be charged either by Romania or the state of Florida? Now jumping over to another continent of Asia, in South Korea, one of the world's most hated streamers in Johnny Somali has just pled guilty in South Korean court.
So the thing is, we just got out of the trial. It went absolutely terrible for Johnny, because Johnny showed up more than an hour late with a MAGA hat on and a big bottle of water, and essentially he got in trouble for, number one, wearing the hat, and number two, the bottle.
It's officially over for Johnny Somali, as he has been faced in court in South Korea, where he turned up an hour late and hungover, and has been potentially faced with a 5-year jail sentence. He is absolutely cooked, and I can't think of someone who deserves it more. But we're going to be breaking down everything today, talking about what built up to this point, what happened in court, why he was faced in court, and also what happens if he is convicted, but also what could potentially happen if he's not convicted going forwards, as that is also equally as interesting. So, Johnny Somali is a name that has become synonymous with controversy, chaos, and outright disrespect. But now the self-proclaimed live streaming troll finds himself in a situation that he can't even joke his way out of. With legal troubles mounting, South Korea is not playing around, and they are attempting to make an example of him. And this time, there's a real chance that Johnny Somali could be locked up. But how did we get here? And what exactly happened when he appeared in court just days ago? Now, before we dive into all of the legal troubles, let's rewind the clock and look at who Johnny Somali truly is. Born Ramzi Khalid Ismail on September 26th of 2000 in Phoenix, Arizona, he started gaining attention online for all of the wrong reasons. His brand, disruptive, offensive, and often outright illegal. And all of this was streamed to an audience that thrived on utter chaos. So who were his main targets? Well, Japan, Israel, and now South Korea. And his strategy was incredibly simple. Walk into public spaces, provoke people, and act shocked when he faces the consequences. But as his antics escalated, so did the backlash, and soon enough authorities had had enough of him. So let's talk about why people absolutely despise Johnny Somali, and why his downfall was at this point inevitable. It all started in Japan back in 2023 when he thought it would be quote unquote funny to reference the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki whilst harassing locals. Absolutely despicable piece of shit. The internet, obviously, as you can imagine, exploded, and so did the patience of the Japanese police. He was actually arrested for trespassing on a construction site, and after serving a fine, he was deported. But that was only the beginning of his downfall. If you fast forward to early of 2024 in Israel, that was Johnny's next target. This time he was caught mocking the Jewish culture, posting offensive images on the Western Wall and getting detained for sexual harassment. After that, it was a 50-day ban from Jerusalem. But did he stop there? Well, of course he didn't. And then came South Korea. This is where things started to take quite a significant and dark turn. Arriving in September of 2024, Johnny wasted absolutely no time by disrespecting the country and its locals. He kissed and performed a lewd act on the Statue of Peace, which is actually a monument dedicated to the victims of Japanese wartime sexual slavery. Absolute scumbag. But this wasn't just offensive, it was absolutely disgusting. The South Korean public had had enough of him as well, and things only got worse from there. The breaking point for Johnny Somali though came on October 17th of 2024. Johnny Somali being Johnny Somali, he thought it would be a great idea to storm into the convenience store in Seoul, blast loud music, pour instant noodles all over the counter and harass staff. The police were actually called to this incident, and this time Johnny was actually arrested. But this wasn't just a slap on the wrist.
Bro, I got Korean investigation documents. These niggas been interrogating me for months, for days. These niggas been on my ass.
South Korea actually had banned him from leaving the country at this point, placing him under investigation, and finally in March of 2025 he had his day in court, but trust me, it was nothing short of a circus. March 7th of 2025, Johnny Somali arrives at Seoul Western District Court, late, wearing a white suit and a MAGA hat. If this was supposed to make a statement, it backfired spectacularly. Inside the courtroom, he was an absolute mess. Being hungover and an hour late, and looking in absolute state, hands in his pockets, giving vague answers, claiming he was a quote-unquote student when asked about his occupation. This wasn't a man who was taking his charges actually seriously. This was Johnny, well, being Johnny.
So the thing is, we just got out of the trial. It went absolutely terrible for Johnny, because Johnny showed up more than an hour late with a MAGA hat on and a big bottle of water, and essentially he got in trouble for, number one, wearing the hat, and number two, the bottle.
And here's the kicker. He pleaded guilty. Yep, Johnny admitted to obstructing businesses and violating South Korea's Minor Crimes Act, but his actions outside of the courtroom made it incredibly clear. He wasn't remorseful whatsoever. He told the reporters that, quote, "The Korea is a US vassal state," further fueling absolute outrage. South Koreans were furious, and now everyone's waiting to see what the judge will decide to do next in April. So, you're probably wondering what happens now. Well, Johnny's next court hearing is set for April 9th of 2025, and here's what's at stake. Best case scenario, he gets a fine and deportation. Worst case scenario, he faces up to 5 years in South Korean prison. And let's be honest, South Korea is not playing around and is definitely trying to make an example of Johnny. Given the public outrage, the government may push for the harshest sentence possible to make an example out of him. If he's convicted, he could be banned for life from re-entering South Korea and potentially blacklisted from other neighbouring countries. But what if, against all odds, Johnny is actually acquitted? Well, it's not over. Even if he avoids jail, South Korea could still deport him and immigration authorities could impose a potential travel ban on him. Either way, Johnny Somali's days of reckless live streaming might be coming to an end. So the question is, what do you guys think about all of this? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Do you think he will be acquitted, or do you think he will face the maximum sentence of the law? Jumping back over to the United States though, Aaron Goodwin's wife has put out a murder to hire plot against him. Imagine being happily married, or so you think, only to find out that your spouse is plotting your murder. That's exactly the nightmare that Aaron Goodwin from Ghost Adventures found himself in and is living through right now. His wife, Victoria Goodwin, has been arrested for allegedly trying to hire a hitman to have him killed. And now she's facing some serious legal consequences. But what exactly does this really mean? What charges could she potentially face? And also, what about the supposed hitman that was hired to take Aaron's life? In today's video, we're going to be breaking everything down, talking about what's gone on so far, and also the serious legal ramifications that Victoria Goodwin Goodwin faces now moving forwards. So let's start with what's gone on. This story was broke by TMZ in an exclusive with Aaron Goodwin, but he's best known obviously for his part on Ghost Adventures, being second in command to only Zach Baggins. He's found himself a bit of a cult-like following, becoming one of the most beloved presenters on the entire show. But he found himself at the centre of a real-life horror story recently when authorities uncovered an alleged murder-for-hire plot against him, and the mastermind was none other than his current wife. So here's what we know so far. Victoria has allegedly been communicating with Grant Amato, a convicted murderer currently serving a life sentence in Florida. Through a series of messages, she supposedly provided details about Aaron's filming locations, schedules, and even offered money to have him killed. Reports suggest that the amount offered was $11,515, and that was set aside for the plan with an initial upfront payment of $2,500. Now, thankfully, the plot fell through when prison officials confiscated Amato's phone and found the deeply disturbing messages. Victoria was arrested on March 6th of 2025 in Nevada and is now being held at Clark County Detention Center with a $100,000 bail being hung over her head. But now the question is, what happens next? So right now, Victoria Goodwin is facing two major charges. Number one, a solicitation to commit murder, and number two, a conspiracy to commit murder, both equally as horrendous as the other. So let's break these down. A solicitation to commit murder. This charge applies when someone tries to persuade or pay another person to commit murder on their behalf. Even if the crime was never carried out, just making the request is enough to warrant legal consequences. And a conspiracy to commit murder. This means that two or more people have planned a murder together and took steps to make this happen. Victoria allegedly sent the messages, provided details, and offered money, all of which count as active participation within the conspiracy, making her liable. Now, let's talk about the possible punishment that Victoria could face. If convicted, Victoria could face a maximum sentence of life in prison. In some states, for murder for hire cases qualify for the death penalty, but Nevada does not impose the death penalty for conspiracy alone. Still, she's looking at decades behind bars if found guilty. But let's not forget about the other half of this crime, Grant Amato. The convicted murderer Victoria allegedly conspired with. Even though Amato is already serving life in prison, this isn't just going to be swept under the rug. Since he was actively participating in the conversation about arranging a murder, he could be charged with conspiracy as well. And while he may already have a life sentence, these new charges could mean additional time added to his current sentence, stricter prison conditions, and also limited parole opportunities if they existed at all. Essentially, even from behind bars, Amato could be facing even more significant legal trouble. So you're probably wondering what's going to happen next in court. Well, Victoria Goodwin's next court appearance is scheduled for March 25th of 2025, and this will determine whether the case goes to trial, if a plea deal is reached, or if she continues to fight the charges. Here's what could happen in a court of law. If she pleads guilty, she might negotiate a plea deal for a reduced sentence in exchange for admitting her involvement. Number two, if she pleads not guilty, the case goes to trial, where the prosecution will present the text messages, financial transactions, and testimony from law enforcement. And number three, if convicted by a jury, she could receive a sentence of up to 20 years to life in prison. Now, this case is already highly publicised, and prosecutors may push for the maximum sentence to make an example out of her. Meanwhile, Aaron Goodwin is left processing this betrayal while preparing to testify against his own wife. What a position to be in. But could Victoria avoid prison full stop? Now, there is a chance that Victoria Goodwin avoids prison completely. It is possible, but I must say highly unlikely. Her defense team might argue she never actually went through with the crime. She was coerced or manipulated by Amato, and the messages were misinterpreted. I'm not sure. If you see the messages, I'm not sure how that could be misinterpreted. But in a murder for hire case, the law doesn't wait for the act to be committed. The intent alone is enough to charge. Given the mountain of evidence, it's going to be an uphill battle for her defense team, and considering she is stating that the money was only sent so Amato could get some brand new phones, which is probably the worst alibi I've ever heard, it looks like she's not going to win this case, and she's probably going to be facing 20 to life in prison. But what do you guys think? Should Victoria face the full sentence of the law and get life in prison, or do you think that she might get let off easy? And keeping it in America, Netflix has just been duped of $11 million, and this is going to seriously impact one of their, well, I would like to say biggest directors, but he's absolutely not, especially not now, as he's going to be spending potentially the rest of his life behind bars. Imagine being handed $11 million, and instead of making a movie or a series like your job has been intended to, you spend it on luxury cars, gold watches, and even, get this, a $600,000 mattress. Sounds insane, right? Well, that's exactly what happened with Hollywood director Carl Rinch, who is now facing up to, get this, 90 years in prison for one of the biggest fraud scandals in entertainment history. This is gonna blow your mind. So, before we get into that, you're probably wondering who's Carl Rinch and how did he manage to pull off a scam so massive that even Netflix was fooled. Today we're going to be breaking down the shocking fraud and wild spending spree and why the FBI and the IRS are now making sure that he'll never direct another film ever again, let alone that, but actually see the outside world. Well, Carl Rinch wasn't exactly a household name, but he had the makings of a Hollywood big shot. In 2013, he directed 47 Ronin, a Keanu Reeves-led samurai film that, well, completely bombed at the box office, unfortunately. But despite that failure, Rinch managed to convince Netflix to fund a brand new sci-fi series called White Horse. Now, this series was originally owned by Amazon, but Netflix bought the rights to it about a few years ago for around $68 million. And Netflix, being Netflix, handed him a staggering $44 million on top of that to make the vision come to life. Now, here's where things start to get a little bit suspicious with this. By early 2020, Rinch had burned through most of Netflix's money, but the show still wasn't actually finished. So, what did he do? You're probably wondering at this point, well, you'd probably think of some budget cuts, you'd find ways to cut corners, but instead what he did was he went back to Daddy Netflix and asked for a further $11 million. He claimed that the money was quote-unquote essential to complete White Horse, but in reality, it was just about to fuel one of the most insane spending sprees that Hollywood had ever seen. But he went to Netflix and stated that he needed this for pre- and post-production finishes on the show. Now you might think, okay, maybe he used some of the money for production, right? Well, no, not at all. Instead, Carl Rinch went on a full-on billionaire mode, and he went on and spent some of the most staggering things that you could ever think of. So he spent around $2.4 million on 5 Rolls Royces and a Ferrari, $652,000 on a luxury watch and designer clothes, $638,000 on 2 mattresses, mattresses, $3.7 million on furniture and antiques, and over $1 million on legal fees to sue Netflix for even more money. The audacity of this guy to actually steal their money, use their money to then buy a lawyer to sue them. What is bro thinking? You heard that right. The man literally spent more on a bed than most people spend in an entire lifetime. But I guess that's what happens when you get given that much money. But, you know, you're probably wondering, well, surely Netflix must have noticed. Well, not at first. But after months of zero progress on White Horse, they started asking some very serious questions. And by early of 2021, they completely pulled the rug, realizing that they had been scammed. Netflix immediately took legal action against Rinch and won an arbitration case, forcing Rinch to pay back $8.8 million. But by then, the damage was already done and the money had already been spent. And this is where things get really serious, because now it's not just Netflix going after Rinch, it's actually the US government. On March 18th of 2025, Rinch was arrested by federal agents and hit with multiple charges of wire fraud and money laundering, the kind of crimes that can put you away for life. Wire fraud, for example, serves up to 20 years in prison. Money laundering, a further 20 years per count of money laundering, and the total maximum sentence is 90 years in prison if Rinch is found guilty on all charges. You're probably thinking, well, what happens next? Well, Carl is actually going to prison for life. Well, here's what could happen next. If he pleads guilty, he might get 10 to 15 years. If he fights and loses, he could face 40 plus years in federal prison. The government will seize all of his assets and he'll have to say goodbye to those Rolls Royces and all those expensive mattresses. But the big question is, will Hollywood ever see another scam like this, or is this an ultimate warning shot? This is easily one of the wildest fraud cases we've ever seen come out of Hollywood. But what do you think? Should Rinch be going to prison for life, or does Netflix share some blame for handing him that much money with no oversight whatsoever? What do you guys make of this though? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. While you're down there, jump to get the hell out of that like button, subscribe if you're new, and until next time, I'll speak to you later. Peace.